3 years ago, Daniel Vittori walked away from the woman he loved and the child he never knew. But tonight, in the pouring rain, he sees her. Again, Emily, standing there with a little girl whose eyes are identical to his. Shock, regret, and a lifetime of lost moments hit him like a storm. Will he have a chance to make things right, or has he lost them forever? Watch as a cold billionaire faces the consequences of his choices and discovers a love and a family he thought was gone forever. I'm so glad you're here. Tell me, where are you listening to me from today? Make sure you stay with me till the very end. I promise this story will touch your soul and leave you breathless. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story like this. Now, let's dive right into today's unforgettable tale. Daniel Vittori's mind raced faster than his car as he weaved through the city streets, the glowing neon lights reflecting off the slick asphalt, blurring into streaks of color with every turn he took. The tires hummed against the rain-slick roads, but his attention was elsewhere, consumed entirely with quarterly reports, upcoming mergers, and the impossible deadlines that ruled his life. The world outside his tinted windshield existed in muted sounds of rain hitting the roof, the occasional honk from a distracted driver, and the low hum of his car's engine. But nothing could pierce the fortress of his thoughts. Yet, in the periphery of his vision, a sudden flash of brown forced his eyes away from spreadsheets and contracts. Something, or rather someone, stopped him mid-thought, made his heart twist and lurch with a combination of disbelief, nostalgia, and something he had long buried. Longing. It was Emily. His Emily. Standing there in the rain, her silhouette framed against the dim streetlights, soaked to the bone, yet somehow exuding an ethereal beauty that no rain, no storm, no passage of time could diminish. Her hair clung to her face in damp, soft waves, droplets rolling down her cheeks, yet her presence was magnetic, arresting, impossible to ignore. But it wasn't just Emily that made his chest tighten, his breath catch in his throat, and his hands tremble against the steering wheel. It was the little girl she held, a tiny, delicate bundle wrapped in a pastel coat, clutching Emily's arm with small, determined fingers, looking out with wide, curious eyes. And those eyes, Daniel's stomach twisted violently as he realized the horrifying, intoxicating truth. They were his. For a heartbeat, the world around him ceased to exist. The rain, the streetlights, the impatient cars honking behind him all faded into a grey blur. His mind screamed, refused to accept what his heart already knew. 3 years. 3 long, unforgiving years of absence, of cold ambition, of work that had consumed every ounce of his being. He had prided himself on his focus, his discipline, his success. He had convinced himself that love could wait, that family could wait, that Emily could wait. And now she stood there, drenched, luminous, holding the tangible proof of everything he had abandoned, and he could do nothing but stare. His foot slammed on the brakes, tires screaming against the slick road as the car skidded, hydroplaning dangerously close to the curb. Daniel gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles whitened, sweat mixing with the rain dripping through his hairline. His pulse thundered in his ears, drowning out the pitter-patter of rain around him, the screeching brakes of cars behind him, the honking horns. He wanted to move forward, to race through the rain and sweep Emily and their daughter into his arms. But he was frozen, rooted in place by a mix of fear, guilt, and disbelief, so sharp it cut through him like a blade. The little girl tugged at Emily's coat, oblivious to the storm raging around her. Tiny raindrops clung to her lashes, making her look impossibly vulnerable, impossibly human. Daniel felt a surge of emotion so fierce it nearly stopped his heart. She looked like him. Every curve of her small face, the shape of her eyes, the tiny rise of her cheeks. It was as if he were staring into a mirror of a part of himself he had never known existed, a fragment of his soul he had cruelly ignored. Memories flooded him uninvited. He saw Emily laughing in the sun, twirling in the park, the soft curve of her smile as she held his hand, the warmth of her body pressed against his on cold winter nights. And he saw himself turning away, prioritizing deals over kisses, deadlines over dreams, ambition over the very people who had once been his world. Rain poured down harder, beating against his car windows, the droplets running down in rivulets, reflecting fragmented images of Emily and the child. The world seemed to slow, as if even time itself had been stunned by the sight before him. Daniel's eyes darted, desperate for confirmation that this was real. That tiny hand clutching Emily's coat, that hesitant, almost trembling stance, the small face lifted up to him with trust and wonder. It could not be real. Not after all this time. He had imagined what she would look like, imagined how he would feel, but this was beyond imagination. The car engine hummed faintly, the tires slowly coming to a stop as if acknowledging the gravity of the moment. Daniel's breath came in sharp, ragged gasps, steam rising from his soaked hair and collar as he realized he hadn't breathed in what felt like eternity. He wanted to call her name, to shout, to break the barrier of space and time that separated them. But no sound emerged. His voice had abandoned him, his words dissolving into the rain-soaked air. And then she turned. Emily's eyes met his across the wet street. Wide, startled, wary, yet unmistakably alive with the fire, he remembered her gaze pierced him, cutting through the fog of his disbelief, confronting him with unspoken questions, accusations, and a quiet, contained strength he had always loved and feared. Daniel wanted to move, to close the distance, to shield them from the cold, the rain, the years of absence, but his legs refused to obey. The little girl blinked up at him, wet lashes glistening, her tiny lips parting as she uttered a single word that made his blood freeze, made every thought, every plan, every carefully constructed wall crumble instantly. "Daddy?" Time stopped. The world held its breath. The rain fell harder, but it was insignificant compared to the storm erupting in his chest. Daniel's hands shook, a mixture of fear, disbelief, and a longing so profound it left him hollow. 3 years. 3 years he had never heard that word from his own daughter. 3 years of missed smiles, first words, first steps, first laughter. He had lost all of it, and now the universe had cruelly, miraculously placed it right in front of him, forcing him to confront everything he had forsaken. Emily's eyes widened at the sound, a mixture of shock, fear, and something unspoken, an unvoiced question of whether he deserved to be here, whether he could ever make amends. The little girl clutched her coat tighter, as if sensing the tension, her small heart beating with curiosity and trust, unaware of the storms of emotion raging in the man frozen before her. Daniel swallowed hard, his throat tight, his chest heaving, and the rain continued to pour, cold and unrelenting, as if echoing the weight of the moment. His mind spun, desperate for answers, for a plan, for a reason why the universe would grant him this second chance. But words failed him, actions faltered, and all he could do was stare at the two beings who had been his world, his heart, and his home, standing just meters away in the pouring rain, untouched by the passage of time except for the scars he alone bore. Every memory he had buried clawed its way back, mixing with the raw present. The laughter, the fights, the promises, the brokenness, the absence, and now, this. He wanted to step forward, to kneel in the mud, to beg for forgiveness with every ounce of his being. But fear rooted him. Would Emily let him? Would she forgive him? Would the child, this tiny, innocent reflection of himself, accept the father who had abandoned her? And just as his hand lifted toward the door handle, as the first tentative movement toward reconciliation sparked within him, the girl spoke again, her small voice breaking the rhythm of his panic. "Daddy!" And that single word, repeated softly, tentatively, hanging in the storm-soaked air like a fragile promise, was enough to make him feel both hope and terror at the same time. Daniel realized, with a mixture of dread and desire, that nothing would ever be the same again. The rain could fall endlessly, the city could swirl in chaos, but here, in this one drenched street, fate had stopped, forcing him to face the consequences of his choices and the possibility of redemption he had never imagined. He gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles burned, staring at Emily, staring at the child, and in that instant, the world held its breath. Every heartbeat, every drop of rain, every memory, every shred of guilt collided in a storm far greater than the one outside. Daniel's mind screamed for action, for courage, for the strength to cross the distance and claim what had always been his heart. And just as he opened his mouth, a thunderclap echoed across the city, as if the heavens themselves were impatient for the answer he could not yet give. 2. Daniel's eyes never left Emily and the small figure clinging to her coat. His chest tightened so sharply it felt as though the rain itself were pressing against him, squeezing every ounce of composure from his body. Each drop that slid down his cheeks mirrored the tears he could not yet release, a physical manifestation of the storm inside him. Memories surged unbidden, unstoppable, crashing through the carefully constructed walls he had built over the past 3 years. He remembered her laughter, a melody so bright it had once filled every dark corner of his ambition-driven life. He remembered the way her eyes sparkled when she caught him staring at her, the way her hair smelled after the rain, the warmth of her touch, delicate yet grounding. And he remembered leaving, telling himself work mattered more, that ambition could fill the void love had once claimed. He had been wrong. He had been blind, consumed by the illusion of power, the fleeting thrill of success, ignoring the reality that family, love, and connection were the true treasures he had abandoned. And now, here they were. Emily, drenched and unyielding in her strength, and their daughter, a tiny mirror of his own essence, staring at him with trust and innocence that cut through his shame like a blade. Daniel's knees felt weak, but he forced himself to remain seated in the car, hands gripping the wheel as though it could anchor him to reality, while his mind threatened to spiral into chaos. He wanted to call her name. He wanted to shout, to run through the rain, to scoop them both into his arms and never let go. But every instinct that had once made him cautious, every fear that had buried him in work and isolation, now chained him in place. His mind screamed with desperation, "Don't move too fast, don't scare them, don't ruin the moment before it even begins." Yet, his heart countered, pounding against his ribs, desperate to act, to reclaim what he had lost. Emily's eyes, wary, yet still luminous with the quiet strength he had loved and feared, met his. She did not smile. She did not beckon. Instead, she assessed him, as if reading every thought he had, every memory, every ounce of regret and longing that had accumulated over 3 long years. Daniel felt naked under her gaze, stripped of the persona of the successful, unflinching billionaire he had worked so hard to become. She saw through him, to the man who had left, to the man who had failed, and perhaps to the man who still loved her beyond measure. The little girl shifted, tiny fingers clutching Emily's coat tighter, unaware of the full weight of the storm, the physical rain and the emotional one that thundered between the 3 of them. Her voice, soft, tentative, repeated that one fragile word, "Daddy." And Daniel felt a shiver travel through him, equal parts joy, fear, and crushing guilt. He wanted to speak, to answer, but the words lodged in his throat, heavy and unformed. The rain blurred his vision, droplets mixing with tears that threatened to spill, making the world outside the car seem distorted, surreal, almost dreamlike. Each flash of passing streetlight reflected in the puddles, in Emily's wet hair, in the tiny girl's innocent eyes, making him feel as if he were suspended in a moment outside of time, trapped between what was lost and what could still be reclaimed. He realized with a weighty clarity that he had been a stranger to his own daughter, a shadow haunting her early years without ever truly existing in them, and that knowledge was a blade twisting in his chest, sharp, unrelenting, impossible to ignore. Emily shifted, stepping back slowly, shielding the child as though her presence could somehow protect her from the storm outside, and from the storm now raging in Daniel's heart. The gesture was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet it struck him like a physical blow. She was cautious. She did not trust him, and for good reason. He had abandoned them. He had left a hole in their lives that could not be patched with apologies alone. And in that single movement, that small act of protective instinct, Daniel felt the immensity of what he had lost, the chasm between them that 3 years had carved with precision. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. He wanted to move, to step out, to kneel in the rain, to speak words of remorse and devotion, but every muscle hesitated. Fear whispered, "She may push you away. She may never forgive you. She may take your child and disappear before you even have a chance." And the thought alone made his stomach twist, made the rain feel colder, sharper, almost accusatory. Daniel's gaze fell on the little girl again, her small, curious eyes watching him with the kind of trust he had never earned. Her tiny hands fumbled with the edges of Emily's coat, tugging softly, innocently, asking questions her voice could not yet form. And in that, he saw not just his daughter, but a reflection of everything he had missed. First steps, first words, bedtime stories he would never hear unless he earned them now, immediately, with patience, with humility, with unwavering commitment. He remembered nights spent working late, telling himself that success would eventually fill the void. But in the reflection of her innocent eyes, he understood the cruelest truth. Nothing, no amount of money, no accolades, no empire, could ever replace the love, trust and presence he had forfeited. And now, here they were, standing in the rain, and he had one chance to begin again, or ruin everything irreparably. Emily shifted her weight, glancing over her shoulder at the child, who stared at him once more, unblinking, expectant. The silent exchange between mother and child, subtle yet decisive, reminded him that Emily still held the reins. She would choose how close he could get, how much of his past he could redeem, and how she would allow or deny him entry back into their lives. The power, the decision, rested in her hands, and the gravity of that realization pressed down on him, heavier than the rain itself. Daniel felt his chest tighten with an ache that spread from his heart to his limbs, leaving him trembling. Every memory of joy, of intimacy, of shared laughter with Emily collided violently with the regret of absence. The rain continued to pour, soaking his car, his suit, but he barely noticed. His focus was locked on Emily, on the child, on the chasm of lost years, and the fragile bridge of hope now stretching uncertainly before him. A flash of lightning illuminated the street, casting their silhouettes against the wet asphalt in stark relief. For a moment, Daniel imagined the consequences of every choice he had ever made, the deals he had pursued instead of dinner dates, the late nights he had spent ignoring her calls, the endless hours spent in boardrooms while life moved on without him. And in that instant, as thunder rolled above, he realized the enormity of the challenge ahead. To regain trust, to reclaim love, to find his place in a life he had abandoned, and to earn the title of father he had once forfeited. Emily took a slow, deliberate step backward, pressing the child closer to her chest, and Daniel's breath caught. The tiniest hesitation, the smallest act of caution, was a signal he understood. The storm outside mirrored the storm within, and patience, humility, and courage were the only way to navigate it. He could not force his way in. He could only prove, with every action, every word, every heartbeat, that he was present, that he was committed, that he had changed. The child tilted her head slightly, a single strand of wet hair clinging to her forehead, her eyes searching his for an answer he was not yet ready to give. And Daniel realized that her trust, pure and unearned, was both an opportunity and a test. One wrong move, one misstep, and he could lose her forever. The rain intensified, cold droplets mingling with the sweat and tears on his face, as if the heavens themselves were holding their breath. And then, in the quiet between the thunderclaps, he heard Emily whisper, almost imperceptibly, a voice that trembled with restrained emotion, "You're here. Why now?" The question struck Daniel like a physical blow. It was not an accusation, though it carried that weight. It was a challenge, a demand, a plea for understanding, and an invitation to prove that he could be the man he had failed to be. Daniel's mind raced, words caught in his throat. Action felt impossibly slow, but the rain, the child, Emily's unwavering gaze, and the years of lost time pressed him forward, insisting that he must act before the moment slipped into eternity. Daniel's hand lifted from the steering wheel, trembling, reaching toward the door. Each second stretched unbearably long. Each heartbeat echoed the stakes: success or failure, connection or distance, redemption or eternal regret. The rain fell harder, the wind whispered warnings, and the city held its breath along with him. And as the door creaked open, the first tentative motion toward reconciling 3 years of absence, Daniel realized that everything, every decision, every emotion, every heartbeat was about to change in an instant. 3. Daniel's chest ached with a weight he had not known possible as he finally forced himself out of the car, each step toward Emily and the small figure beside her feeling both monumental and terrifying. The rain clung to him like a second skin, soaking his suit, plastering his hair to his forehead. Yet none of it mattered. His world had narrowed to the tiny child who stared at him with wide, trusting eyes, and the woman who had been the center of his life before ambition had claimed him entirely. The little girl was smaller than he had imagined, delicate in a way that made his heart constrict painfully. Her tiny fingers clutched Emily's hand with a grip that seemed simultaneously fragile and determined, as though she understood the storm surrounding them but refused to be frightened by it. Daniel's eyes traced every detail: the soft curl of her hair dampened by the rain, the delicate curve of her lips, the luminous brown of her eyes that mirrored his own so perfectly it felt impossible. His throat tightened as he realized that this tiny human being, this fragment of himself, had lived for over 2 years without knowing the warmth of his presence, without the security of his arms. He wanted to speak, to say something that would erase the past, to beg for forgiveness, to promise that nothing would ever separate them again. But no words came. His voice, so often commanding in boardrooms and negotiations, had abandoned him completely, leaving him raw, exposed, and utterly human. Each breath he drew felt heavy with the weight of the years he had lost, the milestones he had missed, the countless firsts that would never be repeated. The little girl's soft giggle as she tugged at Emily's coat was a dagger to his ego, a painful reminder of his absence, of the life he had forsaken for ambition and success. Daniel's gaze flicked from Emily to their daughter and back again, desperate to understand how 3 years could have passed without him, and yet here they were, alive, tangible, undeniable. His mind raced with questions, each one louder and more urgent than the last. How could I have been so blind? How could I have let ambition blind me to the love and family I had? How do I even begin to reclaim what I've lost? The little girl tilted her head slightly, observing him with the kind of innocent curiosity that only a child could possess. Her tiny mouth opened again, and in a voice so soft it almost disappeared beneath the patter of rain, she whispered once more, "Daddy." Time seemed to freeze. Daniel felt every nerve in his body tingle, every memory, every pang of regret, every ounce of longing crashing down at once. He wanted to scoop her into his arms, to feel the weight of her small body against his chest, to breathe in the scent that was uniquely hers, to close the years of absence with a single embrace. But Emily's protective stance remained firm. She did not move, her expression unreadable, her gaze assessing, wary, and infinitely strong. She was a barrier he could not bypass with force, only with patience, humility, and proof that he had changed. The rain intensified, pounding against the asphalt, drumming on his shoulders, soaking him through to the bone. Every droplet felt like a reminder of his past failures, a cold, tangible reflection of the distance he had created between himself and his family. Yet within that storm, within the chaos and the cold, there was also clarity, a piercing, undeniable truth that he could not ignore. The child before him was his, every tiny feature a reflection of his own blood, and every small gesture an invitation to rebuild the bond he had destroyed. Daniel stepped closer, careful, measured, as if every inch carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken apologies. The little girl's eyes followed him, wide and unblinking, and for a moment he saw fear, curiosity, and an unspoken question in their depths. Could he be trusted? Could he be the father she had never known? His chest tightened further at the thought that a single misstep could shatter this fragile connection before it even began. Emily shifted subtly, moving slightly in front of their daughter, her protective instincts clear and unwavering. Daniel's eyes met hers, and in that moment he saw everything he had feared, the caution, the mistrust, the lingering hurt. But he also saw a flicker of something else, a glimmer of hope, a possibility that perhaps with time he could reclaim not only her trust, but the life they had once dreamed of together. The child reached out a tiny hand toward him, hesitating just at the edge of Emily's protective hold. Daniel froze, every muscle in his body taut with anticipation and fear. One wrong move, one forced step, and he could lose this fragile moment entirely. Yet he could not let fear hold him back. With slow, deliberate motion, he extended his hand, palm open, heart exposed, as if offering not just himself but every ounce of love and devotion he had withheld for 3 long years. The little girl's eyes widened, a mixture of caution and curiosity reflecting in their brown depths. Her small fingers twitched, uncertain whether to reach out or retreat. And in that instant, Daniel felt the weight of every lost birthday, every missed milestone, every lullaby he had never sung, pressing down on him like a tidal wave. The rain fell harder, a cold, insistent reminder that the world outside would continue. But he had this one chance to change the course of their lives. Emily's lips parted slightly, her gaze shifting between him and their daughter, a silent conversation passing between them. Daniel could not hear the words, could not decipher the emotions fully, but he understood the message. Trust would not be given freely. It would have to be earned, proven with actions, not words, and he was ready, terrified, trembling, but ready to do whatever it took. The child's small hand hovered in the space between them, a delicate bridge suspended in the storm. Daniel's heart leapt, then sank, then soared again with every heartbeat. He felt the magnitude of this moment in a way that left him breathless. This was not just about him, not just about Emily, not just about his missed years. It was about the chance to rebuild, to love unconditionally, to finally be the father he had never been. A flash of lightning illuminated the street, casting Emily and their daughter in stark relief against the rain-soaked pavement. Daniel felt every emotion intensify, the regret, the longing, the hope, the fear. He wanted to speak, to kneel, to plead, to promise. Yet he hesitated, knowing that words alone would not be enough. Every second stretched painfully, each one a test of patience, a challenge to prove that he had changed, that he was worthy of their love. And then, just as the wind shifted and a new wave of rain swept through, the little girl spoke again, her tiny voice trembling, soft, questioning. "Daddy, will you hold me?" Daniel's breath caught, every muscle in his body rigid with anticipation and fear. The words were simple, fragile, yet they carried the weight of a lifetime of lost moments. He wanted to answer immediately, to sweep her into his arms and never let go, but he hesitated, knowing that one wrong gesture could push them away forever. Emily's gaze sharpened, a silent warning, a test, a boundary. Daniel nodded slightly, a promise in his eyes, and took one slow, deliberate step closer, hands open, heart bare, ready to bridge the chasm of years with patience, humility, and love. The rain poured harder, the city around them blurring into streaks of light and shadow. Daniel's heart thundered in his chest as he waited, breath held for the fragile moment of trust to solidify, for their daughter to decide if the father she had never known could finally become the man she deserved. And as a final distant clap of thunder rolled across the city, Daniel realized with piercing clarity nothing would ever be the same again. One choice, one step, one act of courage, and either a bond would form that could withstand any storm, or it would shatter before it had even begun. Daniel's foot hesitated on the slick asphalt, water pooling around his polished shoes, soaking through his suit and clinging to his skin. The luxury fabric, expensive beyond measure, now felt meaningless, irrelevant in the face of the life he had abandoned and the child who reached for him with innocent trust. Every raindrop, every rivulet sliding down his face seemed to mirror the torrent of emotion within him: shock, longing, guilt, fear, and a fragile hope, all colliding in a way he had never experienced, in boardrooms, in penthouses, or among the endless deals that had once consumed him. He stepped out fully, leaving the warmth and safety of the car behind, and the cold, sharp rain slammed into him like the reality of the moment. Water soaked his hair, plastered it to his forehead, and ran in rivulets down his neck. But Daniel scarcely noticed. His eyes were locked on Emily, locked on the small figure clinging to her coat, and the years of absence, the missed milestones, the broken promises weighed on him so heavily he nearly stumbled. Emily's eyes widened as she noticed him fully outside the car, the droplets of rain on his suit and hair reflecting the dim streetlights. Shock rippled through her expression, mingling with the pain that lingered from his departure 3 years ago, and a subtle, bitter edge of anger she could not completely hide. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice breaking almost imperceptibly, fragile and raw. It was a name she had not said aloud in years, yet it carried with it every memory, every hurt, every love, and every betrayal all at once. Daniel's chest tightened, and he tried to speak, tried to break the silence, but his voice abandoned him entirely. No words could encapsulate the torrent of regret, the weight of missed time, the horror of the milestones he had forfeited. The little girl, sensing the tension, inched closer, tiny hands stretching toward him, hesitating just at the edge of Emily's protective embrace. Her brown eyes, mirrors of his own, held no judgment, only curiosity, longing, and that childlike trust that could shatter the strongest hearts. She repeated the word softly, hesitantly. "Daddy." The sound of her voice cut through Daniel like a blade, tearing down every wall he had built over years of self-imposed isolation. It was a word he had longed to hear, a word he had imagined countless times in the quiet of his empty apartment, yet never with the reality of her face, her small hand, her trust before him. He felt his knees weaken, and without thinking, he sank to them, mud squishing beneath him, cold and unrelenting, soaking his clothes further. His heart thundered violently, each beat echoing in his chest like a warning and a promise. Tears streamed freely down his face, mingling with the rain, each one a testament to the remorse he could no longer hide, the love he could no longer deny, the years he could never reclaim. He saw the daughter he had never known, the fragment of himself growing before his eyes, and the woman he still adored, standing there both strong and fragile, guarding the child they had shared. Every instinct screamed to reach out, to scoop the little girl into his arms, to hold them both and make up for everything he had lost, but fear rooted him. What if she rejected him? What if Emily never forgave him? What if this moment, this fragile opening, shattered because he moved too fast? Emily took a cautious step backward, shielding the child subtly, her protective stance unwavering. She was testing him, weighing him, measuring whether he could handle the responsibility, the love, and the humility that the moment demanded. Daniel's eyes followed every movement, every shift of her posture, reading them with the desperation of a man who had nothing left but this chance. The rain fell harder, drumming on his shoulders, sliding down the slick pavement, soaking the little girl's hair and coat. The city around them blurred into streaks of light, the storm turning the world into a grey, chaotic reflection of his own emotions. He was acutely aware of every detail, the child's tiny fingers curling and uncurling, Emily's subtle inhalations as she considered him, the way the wind whipped through the wet streets, the distant wail of a siren, and yet he could focus on nothing but the two people who had been his world and yet remained distant, unreachable, yet physically present. The little girl leaned slightly forward, unsure whether to cross the invisible line between him and Emily, her soft, tentative voice repeating the word that had haunted his dreams. "Daddy?" Each syllable sent a jolt through Daniel's chest, as if electricity ran through his very veins, making him shiver from the combination of cold and emotion. He extended a hand slowly, trembling, wet fingers stretching out to meet hers. One wrong gesture, one misstep, and he could lose the fragile trust she had begun to offer. But hesitation now felt more dangerous than action. His eyes searched Emily's face, seeking permission, understanding, any sign that he could bridge the chasm that 3 years had carved between them. Emily's gaze softened slightly, though it remained guarded, filled with a mix of lingering pain, love that had never truly died, and the challenge of making him earn their lives back. Her lips parted, releasing a soft, almost trembling whisper, heavy with emotion and accusation. "Why didn't you ever come back?" The words hit Daniel like a physical blow, reverberating through every part of his body. He wanted to speak, to explain, to justify, to beg, but again, no words came. Only the raw, unfiltered weight of regret pressed against him, mingling with the pounding rain and the helplessness of the moment. His gaze fell to their daughter, whose eyes were still fixed on him, and he realized that she deserved more than words. She deserved action, presence, and the undivided love of a father who had been absent far too long. He lowered himself fully to the wet, muddy ground, kneeling not just in desperation, but as an act of surrender, humility, and readiness. The little girl's hands reached toward him again, trembling slightly, and Daniel felt an ache so deep it left him breathless. He could almost hear the silent plea in her eyes. "Will you be my father? Will you be my safe place? Will you be ours?" The storm around them raged, mirroring the turmoil in his soul. The wind pulled at his soaked hair, whipped against his face, blurred his vision with sheets of rain, but nothing could drown out the urgency, the clarity, the absolute reality of the moment. He had to act or risk losing everything forever. Emily's eyes glimmered with unshed tears as she assessed him. She had loved him once, and perhaps still did, but the scars of abandonment were etched into her soul. Every action, every hesitation, every expression would be scrutinized, and Daniel knew that one false move could erase any chance at redemption. He swallowed hard, heart pounding, and lifted his gaze toward hers, silently promising that he would stay, that he would fight, that he would never leave them again. The little girl, emboldened slightly by his attention, repeated the word once more, "Daddy?" And in that word, soft, trembling, and full of hope, Daniel heard both accusation and invitation. The rain poured harder, the thunder rolled closer, and the city seemed to hold its breath along with him. One act, one movement, one small gesture would decide everything. He extended both hands toward her, trembling, soaked, vulnerable, and whispered through chattering teeth and tears, "I'm here. I'll never leave again." Emily's lips parted further, her shoulders trembling slightly as the weight of 3 years and all their unresolved pain pressed on her. The little girl leaned forward, tiny hands wrapping tentatively around his fingers, and Daniel felt a surge of hope, fear, love, and longing all at once. Thunder rolled overhead, echoing the intensity of the moment. The rain, relentless. Relentless, as the emotions cascading through him seemed to bless and test them all at once. Daniel's knees squelched in the mud, his hair plastered to his forehead, his suit ruined. But none of that mattered. The only thing that mattered was the fragile, trembling connection forming before him. Emily whispered again, her voice barely audible over the storm, "Can you really stay?" Daniel's heart thundered. Every beat, every pulse, every fiber of his being screamed yes. But the moment hung suspended, fragile, delicate, as though the rain, the storm, and time itself waited for the answer that could either begin healing or end hope. Daniel's chest heaved, each inhale sharp with guilt, each exhale a confession he could not fully voice. His suit was drenched, clinging to his body like a second skin, yet the discomfort of wet fabric was trivial compared to the storm roaring in his soul. He had come face to face with the daughter he had never known, a fragment of himself, and the woman whose love he had once held above all else, and now he had no words worthy of the moment. I didn't know. I didn't realize." His voice cracked, barely audible above the drumming rain, tremors of regret shaking every syllable. Each word felt inadequate, a fragile bridge over a chasm of years lost, milestones missed, and moments that would never return. The sound of his own voice, raw and broken, surprised him. He had been a man of certainty, of calculated control, yet here he was, vulnerable, exposed, at the mercy of emotions he had ignored for far too long. Emily's eyes did not soften immediately. They were sharp, assessing, holding every ounce of pain, mistrust, and hurt he deserved. He had been gone for 3 years, leaving her to navigate life and motherhood alone, and now he stood before her, a man soaked to the bone, begging for forgiveness that had no guarantee. Each heartbeat hammered in his chest, a constant reminder of his absence, the nights he had missed, the first words and first steps he had never witnessed. The little girl tugged again at Emily's coat, tiny fingers clinging with all the innocence and instinctive understanding that children possess. "Daddy?" she whispered once more, uncertainty coloring her voice as if she could sense the tension, the unspoken questions, the years of distance compressed into this single, rain-drenched moment. Daniel's heart constricted painfully, her voice, soft and vulnerable, pierced through layers of pride and fear. She did not yet understand the gravity of his absence, yet her tiny call for him ignited a fire of longing, regret, and determination in his soul. He stepped forward slightly, the mud squelching beneath his feet, but his movements were cautious. Every inch closer was measured, deliberate, as if he could collapse the walls of time simply by approaching. Yet Emily remained poised, a protective shield between him and their daughter, her hands holding the little girl's coat with a quiet, unyielding grip. Daniel's mind raced, every second stretching like eternity. If he moved too fast, would she retreat? If he faltered, would he lose this fragile opportunity forever? Rain poured in relentless sheets, drenching them all, soaking the little girl's curls and Emily's clothes. But Daniel barely noticed the cold or discomfort. His focus was entirely on the tiny brown eyes locked on him, the expression of cautious hope mingled with fear. He had once believed that success, money, and power defined him, but in this moment, stripped of everything but the weight of his regret and the possibility of redemption, he understood the true measure of life: love, family, presence, and the delicate trust of those you hurt. I want to be here," he whispered, voice trembling. "I want to be your father." The words, though simple, were laden with every ounce of remorse, longing, and sincerity he had felt for the past 3 years. Each syllable carried the weight of lost time, of nights spent alone, of a child's milestones he had never witnessed, of the silent pain etched into Emily's face for years. He could see the flicker of emotions passing over her features: pain, hurt, love, doubt, all battling in her gaze as she remained silent, watching him with careful, guarded eyes. Daniel swallowed hard, feeling the sting of cold rain mixing with the hot sting of tears streaming down his face. He could not retreat now. To turn away would be to abandon them again, to let the years of regret become permanent scars on their hearts. Every fiber of his being screamed that he had to prove himself, not with words alone, but with action, patience, and unwavering presence. He extended his hand slowly toward the little girl, each motion deliberate, as if the fragility of this gesture could either bind them together or shatter their trust completely. The child's tiny fingers twitched, hesitant, unsure whether to reach or retreat, while her wide brown eyes searched his face for truth. Daniel's heart clenched at the hesitation, understanding instinctively that she was testing him, gauging whether this stranger-turned-father could be trusted, could love without abandonment, could stay without faltering. His chest ached with the enormity of the moment, and he realized the stakes could not be higher. One wrong move, one hint of selfishness, and he could lose the daughter he had finally found. Emily's lips pressed together, her eyes reflecting every pang of loneliness, every sleepless night, every question she had asked herself while he was away. Yet behind the guard, a subtle softness began to emerge, tiny cracks in the armor of hurt, as she witnessed the raw, unfiltered vulnerability of the man she had loved and had longed to trust again. She did not speak, but her gaze held a question in its depths. Will he truly stay this time? Or is this another fleeting moment of false hope? The storm around them intensified, lightning flashing across the sky, thunder rolling in deep rumbles, as if nature itself mirrored the tumult in Daniel's soul. Rain coursed over their faces, over their hair, over clothes now soaked and clinging, yet it could not wash away the weight of lost years or the tension crackling between them. Every droplet seemed to punctuate his guilt, yet also offered a kind of cleansing, a chance to begin anew, if only they would let him. The little girl's hand remained inches from his, suspended between caution and curiosity, a bridge over the chasm of lost time. Daniel felt the pull of fear and hope at once, each breath shaky, heart pounding like a drum in a battlefield of emotion. "Please," he whispered, voice breaking again, Let me be part of your life. Let me prove I can be here. Let me love you the way you deserve." Emily's eyes glimmered with unshed tears, the first sign of emotion breaking through the hardness of years. Yet she remained silent, the tension between their shared past and uncertain future palpable. Daniel understood this was not rejection, but a test, a slow, deliberate weighing of whether his promises could be trusted. His own soul seemed to hold its breath alongside hers, every heartbeat stretching, each second a suspended question of hope or heartbreak. The little girl finally inched forward, just slightly, pressing her tiny hand against his extended fingers. Daniel's breath caught. The connection was fragile, tentative, yet infinitely precious. A mixture of relief, hope, and lingering fear flooded him. He could feel the soft warmth of her touch despite the cold, the innocence of her trust despite years of absence, and the immense responsibility that had fallen upon him in this single act. Emily watched silently, every muscle tense, every expression unreadable but tinged with emotion. Her lips trembled as she whispered almost to herself, I need to know you mean it this time." The words struck Daniel with the force of a tidal wave. He nodded, tears mingling with rain, voice trembling but resolute. "I swear, I'll never leave again. I'll stay. I'll be here. I'll be your father, every day, every moment, for the rest of my life." The storm continued to rage around them, and yet in that suspended moment the world seemed to narrow to three figures, bound together by shared history, loss, and the fragile hope of forgiveness. The little girl's hand closed gently around his. Emily's gaze softened ever so slightly, and Daniel realized the first step had been taken, but the journey had only just begun. Every heartbeat screamed that he had failed them in the past, yet he could not turn away now. Every breath, every word, every trembling gesture would be a promise he intended to keep, and as thunder rolled above, Daniel silently vowed, this time he would not leave. This time he would not fail. The next morning dawned grey and muted, the aftermath of the storm lingering in puddles on the streets and on the soft blades of grass outside the small apartment building. Daniel had not slept. His thoughts churned restlessly, memories of the rain-soaked confrontation blending with vivid imaginings of the child he had never held, of the daughter he was determined not to lose. The memory of her small hand in his, tentative yet trusting, and Emily's softened, cautious gaze haunted him and propelled him into action. He could not afford another day of absence, of hesitation, of letting the past dictate the present. He approached their door slowly, careful not to startle them, heart pounding like a drum in his chest. He had brought breakfast, a small basket with warm bread, fruit and juice, hoping the gesture, simple as it was, could convey more than words ever could. Emily peeked through the door, cautious yet curious, her eyes searching his expression as if trying to read every ounce of sincerity. Daniel offered a small, almost shy smile, wet hair clinging to his forehead, clothes still damp from the previous day's rain, and whispered softly, "I brought breakfast. For both of you." The little girl's eyes lit up instantly, sparkling with excitement as she ran forward, arms outstretched. Daniel's heart swelled painfully, each step she took toward him a reminder of the years he had missed, of bedtime stories he had not read, of milestones never shared. He knelt slowly, letting her climb into his arms, feeling her small body press against his chest. Every inhale carried her scent, soft, sweet, unmistakably theirs, and he felt the raw, overwhelming surge of love that had been absent for far too long. Emily watched silently, leaning against the doorway, arms crossed, wary yet attentive. Her gaze was a mixture of lingering love and the protective caution of a mother who had survived heartbreak and hardship without him. Daniel sensed every flicker of doubt, every hesitation, and it spurred him further. He carefully handed her breakfast, nodding slightly in acknowledgement of her presence, wanting to show that he respected her space, her decisions, her pace. Over the next few days, Daniel continued this delicate routine, appearing at dawn with fresh bread or fruit, quietly folding laundry, helping to tidy the living room, and always leaving room for Emily to observe him without being overwhelmed. He read stories at bedtime, each word a testament to his commitment, each page turned with careful attentiveness to their daughter's delighted expressions. The little girl giggled often, her laughter like a balm to his soul. Yet each laugh carried the sting of the time he had lost, of every precious moment he had allowed to slip away. Daniel also began leaving little gifts. A small toy car, a picture book, a tiny dress for her favorite doll, simple tokens meant to show that his love was now present in tangible ways. Emily noticed them, of course, her expression softening imperceptibly, though she did not comment aloud. Each gesture was a silent promise, a subtle bridge over the gap of years lost, a demonstration that he intended to earn their trust with actions, not hollow words. Each day, Emily observed him quietly, noting small changes. He laughed softly with their daughter, his humor gentle and attentive. He knelt patiently to tie her shoes, brushed hair from her forehead, and spoke to her in a tone infused with warmth and tenderness. She glimpsed the man she had once loved, now tempered by humility and a devotion forged through absence and remorse. Slowly, imperceptibly, her walls began to shift, tiny fissures forming in the protective armor she had built around her heart. Yet doubt lingered. Every smile Daniel offered, every gesture, every gentle word had to overcome the memory of his absence, the silent pain of 3 years gone, and the fear of future heartbreak. Emily questioned internally, wondering if the sincerity she saw could truly withstand the test of time, if the man before her could truly remain, or if he would again succumb to ambition and cold detachment. Each day was a balancing act, a fragile dance of trust and observation. One afternoon, Daniel sat at the edge of the sofa, their daughter nestled against him, reading aloud from a picture book. She giggled at his inflections, leaning forward to point at illustrations, and he responded with soft laughter, his voice carrying a warmth that filled the small living room. Emily stood nearby, folding laundry, watching silently. Each gesture, each careful word, each moment of shared laughter was a brick laid in the foundation of renewed trust. But she remained vigilant, knowing the fragility of their bond, understanding that forgiveness was a slow, deliberate process. Later, Daniel ventured to help with household chores, sweeping the kitchen, washing dishes, even hanging clothes on the line despite the drizzle outside. Every motion was deliberate, a demonstration of commitment, and each time Emily glanced his way, she saw evidence that he was present, fully engaged, and invested in the life they could rebuild. Still, uncertainty clouded her expression, and her inner question lingered like a shadow. Can I truly trust him again? Can he stay this time? One evening, as twilight bled into the room through thin curtains, Emily finally spoke, her voice soft, quivering with emotion. She approached him cautiously, hands slightly trembling, eyes glistening with tears she had held back. "Do you really want to stay?" she asked, words fragile but weighted, carrying all the hope, fear, and longing of years spent apart. Daniel paused, heart hammering, overwhelmed by the gravity of her question. The moment stretched, suspended in time. Outside, rain pattered softly against the windows, a gentle reminder of the storm that had brought them back together, a metaphor for the emotional turbulence they were navigating. Daniel reached for her hands, letting her see the sincerity in his eyes, the resolve in his posture, the unwavering promise in his every movement. His own voice, trembling yet firm, replied, "I want nothing more. I will stay. I am here to be your partner, to be her father, and to never leave again." Emily's lips trembled, eyes wide, searching his face for any hint of deception or hesitation. Her body language softened, yet the uncertainty of the past 3 years lingered in her every movement, every glance. Daniel felt the weight of their shared history, the fragile balance between hope and fear, and knew this was the moment where words alone could not suffice. He had to prove, day after day, that his commitment was real. Their daughter, sensing the change, nestled closer against Daniel's chest, giggling softly. He kissed the top of her head, feeling a warmth and connection he had never allowed himself to experience fully. The sound of her laughter, mingled with Emily's soft breathing nearby, created a fragile harmony, a tentative chord of hope and reconciliation. Yet Daniel knew the journey ahead was long, every moment fraught with the potential for setbacks, and each day demanded vigilance, patience, and unwavering love. The evening settled into a quiet, fragile peace, the storm outside dwindling to a soft drizzle, as if granting them a momentary reprieve to rebuild, to breathe, to hope. But even in the calm, Daniel's mind raced, aware that every step forward was tentative, every gesture had to be proven, and every day could test the fragile trust they were beginning to forge. Would Emily finally allow herself to fully trust him again? Could their daughter accept his presence without fear of abandonment? Could Daniel sustain this devotion in a way that healed the past rather than reopened old wounds? Each question hovered, unanswered, as the trio sat together, bound by past mistakes but illuminated by the fragile glow of hope and the first steps toward healing. The rain had returned that night, soft at first, then steadily drumming against the roof of the small apartment. Daniel stood in the doorway, wet from the drizzle, heart pounding in a rhythm that mirrored the falling drops. He looked at Emily, her silhouette framed by the dim glow of the living room light, her hair damp and clinging to her shoulders, eyes wide yet filled with cautious hope. Everything about her, the curve of her lips, the familiar way she carried herself, the strength in her gaze, pulled at him, tugging at the threads of memory, regret and longing all at once. I want to be here, he said quietly, voice steady but trembling with emotion. Not just today, not just now, but for every day that comes after. I want to be part of your life, all of yours and hers, our daughters. His words, simple yet laden with sincerity, hung in the humid air, heavy with unspoken apologies, with years of absence compressed into a single plea for a second chance. Emily's eyes softened imperceptibly, the tension in her body relaxing just a fraction, though her caution remained. She glanced down at their daughter, who was sitting cross-legged on the floor, her small hands gripping a stuffed bear. The little girl looked up at Daniel, eyes bright, sensing something had shifted in the air, sensing that the father she had only recently met might finally stay. A small giggle escaped her lips as she ran to him, wrapping her tiny arms around his legs. Daniel knelt slowly, arms open, heart swelling with an intensity that was almost painful. The sensation of their daughter in his arms, the warmth and innocence radiating from her small body, was a reminder of everything he had lost, every milestone he had missed, every bedtime story never read. And yet, it was also a promise of what could be, of the life they could build together, if only Emily allowed it. He looked up at her, trying to read the mixture of fear and hope in her expression, the delicate balance between trust and guardedness. His pulse raced as he realized that everything depended on her next words, her next gesture, her willingness to let him back in. Emily's lips trembled slightly, a sign that the years of hurt were slowly giving way to something else, something tender, fragile, yet potent. She stepped closer, her hand hovering over his shoulder before brushing against it lightly, a tentative bridge between past and present. Daniel's chest tightened as he felt the subtle warmth of her touch, the soft electricity of connection that had never fully died, merely buried beneath layers of hurt and absence. The little girl let go of him reluctantly, scampering back toward Emily with a curious glance. Daniel took the opportunity to stand, water dripping from his hair and clothes, standing before Emily fully, exposing his vulnerability and determination. The room felt charged, the air thick with the mingling scent of rain, damp earth, and the faint traces of Emily's perfume, a combination that tugged mercilessly at his heart. He stepped closer, careful, deliberate, letting every movement convey the weight of his intentions. I never stopped thinking about you, he admitted, voice low, almost a whisper. Never stopped loving you. I was blind, consumed by ambition, by work, by everything that didn't matter. And now I see what matters, what I should have never let go, what I can't afford to lose again. His words trembled with raw emotion, yet beneath them lay a fierce determination, the kind that promised he would never falter again. Emily swallowed, her throat tight, eyes glistening as she considered him. The years apart had built walls of pain, distrust and caution, but there was something undeniable in his gaze, something she had known deep down, something she had refused to let herself hope for. She took a tentative step closer, then another, until they were mere inches apart, the distance of 3 years' worth of separation collapsing into a single heartbeat. Their daughter, sensing the gravity of the moment, crawled onto the couch, hugging her bear tightly, eyes wide as she watched the two adults she loved most in the world, finally confronting the feelings they had long suppressed. Daniel's hand reached out, gently brushing a damp strand of hair from Emily's face, lingering at her cheek as if memorizing the contours he had longed for in his dreams. She did not pull away, instead she let him, letting the years of hurt and longing mingle with the tentative hope blossoming between them. And then, slowly, impossibly, they leaned in. Their lips met in a tender, lingering kiss, soft, tentative at first, a whisper of past love reigniting in the present. Daniel felt the warmth of her, the soft press of her lips, the steady beat of her heart against his chest. And it was as if every regret, every tear, every lost moment melted away into the rain-soaked night outside. The kiss deepened, fueled by longing, passion, and a silent acknowledgement that the fire between them had never truly died. It had only been waiting, buried beneath layers of time and pain, for this moment to rekindle. Words became unnecessary. Every touch, every glance, every exhale communicated the love, regret, and hope that neither dared to fully voice aloud. Daniel's hands cradled her face, his thumbs brushing over her cheeks, memorizing the warmth and softness he had yearned for. Emily's hands slid along his shoulders, down his back, anchoring herself to him, as if grounding herself in the certainty that he was truly here, truly present, truly hers again. The little girl's soft giggle punctuated the moment, reminding them of the life they had to nurture together, of the family that could finally be whole if they allowed themselves to trust again. Daniel lifted his head slightly, brushing a damp curl from her forehead, feeling a surge of protective, fierce love for both mother and daughter alike. Every heartbeat was a vow, every breath a pledge that he would never let them go again. Outside, the rain continued to fall, a gentle curtain of cleansing water that mirrored the emotional torrents within the apartment. Daniel whispered promises, low and fervent, words meant to carry him through the rest of their lives. "I'll stay. I'll love you. I'll be the father she deserves, the man you need. I will never leave again." Emily pulled back slightly, breathing heavily, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, the weight of their shared past heavy in the space between them. She searched his eyes for the truth, for the unwavering sincerity that had finally emerged, and asked, voice trembling yet resolute, "Can we really start over?" The question hung in the humid, rain-filled air, a challenge, a plea, a fragile bridge across the years of absence. Daniel's heart swelled, every nerve alight with the enormity of the moment. He reached for her hands, holding them tightly, feeling the warmth of her skin, the softness of her palms, and the unspoken permission that he could finally be part of their lives fully. "Yes," he said, voice steady yet laced with emotion, "we can start over. We will start over. Together." The night pressed on, heavy with possibility, each drop of rain against the windows, a reminder of cleansing, renewal, and the fragile, powerful bond of love that had survived despite time, distance, and absence. Their daughter's sleepy sighs from the couch, the quiet rustle of the apartment settling around them, and the steady rhythm of their joined hands and hearts created a moment suspended in time, a moment full of hope, longing, and the rekindling of a love that had never truly died. Many cliffhangers lingered in the space between kisses and whispers. Would the past truly remain behind them, or would old wounds resurface? Could trust be rebuilt fully, brick by brick, in the days to come? Could they navigate the delicate balance of love, forgiveness, and parenting together without faltering? The questions hung in the stormy night, unanswered, as the three of them, father, mother, and daughter, held each other, ready to face whatever challenges awaited them next. The night had settled into a velvet darkness, the rain outside softening into a gentle drizzle, tapping lightly against the window panes, as if nature itself were reflecting the quiet intensity of the moment within. Daniel held Emily close, her body pressed against his, the warmth of her skin a balm to the ache that had never fully left him since he had walked away all those years ago. Every heartbeat was a drum, echoing both regret and relief, a rhythm that carried him into a new awareness of what truly mattered. He brushed wet strands of hair from her forehead, letting his fingers linger for a moment, memorizing the delicate curves and softness he had longed for, the texture of her hair, damp and fragrant from the rain. Each kiss he placed, on her forehead, her cheeks, the corner of her lips, was infused with unspoken promises, each one a vow that he would never repeat the mistakes of the past. Emily melted slightly into his touch, her body responding instinctively, her trembling hands pressing against him as if seeking reassurance that the man she had loved and lost was finally hers again. In the next room, their daughter slept soundly, curled under a soft blanket, the innocence of her slumber a stark contrast to the emotional storm surrounding her parents. Daniel's gaze softened as he thought of her, the little fragment of himself he had once abandoned and now had a chance to love, nurture, and protect fully. A pang of guilt hit him, sharp and immediate, for every milestone missed, every laugh unheard, every bedtime story untold. Yet, mingled with the guilt was a burning gratitude for this moment, for the opportunity to be the father he had always meant to be. Emily's lips quivered as tears welled in her eyes, glistening in the soft lamplight. "I never stopped loving you," she whispered, her voice trembling yet unwavering, carrying all the emotions of years lost and hope renewed. Daniel's chest constricted with longing, gratitude, and awe, as if her words were a key that unlocked a floodgate of emotions he had kept restrained for far too long. His arms tightened around her, holding her with a tenderness that was almost reverent, a protective embrace, as if he could shield her from every pain, every betrayal, every lingering shadow of the past. Their bodies swayed gently, a rhythm unspoken but deeply understood, as passion, regret, and tenderness intertwined in a delicate dance. Daniel pressed his lips to hers again, this time slower, deeper, a kiss that spoke of years of longing, of missed chances, and of a fire that had never truly gone out. Emily responded in kind, her hands threading through his hair, anchoring herself to him, surrendering to the moment while holding the fragile hope that he would not leave again. The room was filled with the scent of rain mingled with Emily's perfume, the warmth of their bodies pressing together, and the subtle, almost imperceptible sounds of their daughter's quiet breathing. It was a cocoon, an intimate universe where only the three of them, and the promise of love reborn, existed. Daniel's mind raced, replaying memories of past failures, the cold distance that had defined him for years, and the sharp contrast of the man he was now becoming, present and committed. He brushed his thumb across Emily's cheek, gently wiping away a stray tear, his eyes locking with hers in an unspoken dialogue. Every glance, every touch carried volumes, apologies, longing, commitment, and a fervent desire to remain, to rebuild, to nurture a family that had nearly slipped through his fingers. The rain outside intensified briefly, a gentle roar against the windows, punctuating the quiet of the apartment, echoing the emotional crescendo inside. Emily's hands roamed over his back, pressing closer as if to absorb every ounce of reassurance and warmth he could offer. She shivered slightly, not from cold, but from the emotional intensity, the vulnerability, the rawness of reconnecting with a man who had once left her but now stood fully present. Daniel whispered softly, brushing his lips along hers and into the curve of her jaw. "I'll never leave again. I promise." His voice was a low tremor, carrying absolute certainty, an unbreakable vow forged from years of absence and regret. Tears spilled freely from Emily's eyes now, running down her cheeks as she rested her forehead against his chest, her small sobs vibrating against him. Daniel held her tighter, letting her release everything she had contained, the hurt, the fear, the longing, and the love that had never truly faded. He felt the weight of her emotions pressing against his chest, and with every beat, he vowed silently to protect, cherish, and honor the woman and child before him. The little girl stirred in her sleep, rolling slightly, murmuring something indistinct, a gentle reminder that their family was incomplete without her full participation. Daniel's heart clenched at the thought of the years he had lost with her, yet the sight also reinforced the urgency and necessity of staying, of never allowing absence to define him again. Emily lifted her head slightly, gazing into his eyes with a mixture of vulnerability and tentative hope. I don't want to be afraid anymore," she whispered, voice barely audible over the soft rain. Daniel cupped her face in his hands, holding her gaze, letting her see the unwavering devotion, the fierceness of love, and the sincerity in every word. "You have nothing to fear," he assured her, voice steady. "I am here. I am yours. I am hers. I am never leaving again." A quiet silence settled over them, punctuated only by the soft rhythm of rain and their synchronized breathing, each second stretched, heavy with possibility, with vulnerability, with the unspoken acknowledgement that tonight was a turning point. The night their love transformed from tentative reconciliation into a force unbreakable, resilient, and alive. Daniel felt Emily's trembling hands slide into his, interlacing their fingers, a physical connection that mirrored the emotional bond now cementing between them. Their daughter murmured again in sleep, stirring slightly, pulling a blanket closer as if sensing the profound change in her world. The presence of a father, the restored closeness of her parents, and the fragile, growing security of family. Mini cliffhangers whispered in the quiet night. Would their daughter fully accept him as her father without lingering hesitation? Could Emily finally trust that this transformation was permanent, that he would not vanish again? Could their love survive the lingering shadows of doubt and the scars of the past? Each question hung in the gentle darkness, unanswered but potent, as Daniel pressed his lips to Emily's forehead once more, letting her rest against him, holding her as if he could shield her from everything that had ever hurt them. The hours slipped by unnoticed. The rain continued its soft symphony against the windows, now lighter, almost a lullaby. Daniel and Emily remained entwined, bodies and hearts pressed together, each whisper, each kiss, each heartbeat reinforcing the unspoken promise. They were finally, irrevocably, home. Even in the quiet, Daniel's mind remained vigilant, aware of the fragility of the night, the delicate balance of trust, love, and forgiveness. Every fiber of his being was committed to sustaining this transformation, to nurturing the love that had survived absence, distance, and pain. And as Emily's eyes slowly fluttered closed, exhausted yet peaceful, Daniel held her close, letting the soft, rhythmic sound of her breathing guide him into the certainty of his next vow. Never again to leave, never again to falter, never again to let fear or ambition overshadow the life and love he now cherished. 9 months had passed since that rain-soaked night of transformation, yet the memory of it remained vivid in Daniel's mind. The rain now no longer carried the weight of heartbreak, regret, or missed opportunities. Instead, it fell gently, almost tenderly, as if blessing the life he now shared with Emily and their daughter. The city outside their window was alive with its usual rhythm, cars gliding over wet streets, lights reflecting off slick pavements, distant voices carried by the wind. But inside, their apartment had become a sanctuary, a haven of warmth, laughter, and love. Daniel watched as Emily moved about the kitchen, effortlessly multitasking, her movements graceful, familiar, yet imbued with a serenity that reflected the peace they had finally found. The smell of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the faint scent of rain lingering from the morning drizzle. Their daughter, with her soft brown curls bouncing and her bright eyes shining, ran around the living room with uncontainable energy, laughing at a small toy that had clearly captured her fascination. Every sound, the joyful giggle, the shuffle of tiny feet, the gentle clink of a cup on the counter, was a symphony of life, a reminder of everything Daniel had once forsaken and now vowed to cherish forever. "Daddy!" the little girl squealed, her tiny arms flinging wide as she sprinted across the room to Daniel. His heart leapt as he dropped to one knee, arms open, welcoming her with an intensity that made the world outside cease to exist. She collided with him, wrapping her small body around his neck, burying her face in his shoulder, and he felt a surge of emotion so powerful it almost took his breath away. "Daddy! Daddy!" she repeated, her voice bubbling with pure joy, a sound he had longed to hear for years. Daniel hugged her tightly, pressing a kiss to the top of her head, inhaling the familiar, comforting scent of her hair. Emily's eyes glistened with tears as she observed the scene, standing in the doorway, her hands pressed gently over her mouth to stifle the emotion that threatened to overwhelm her. The years of pain, the nights of loneliness, the moments of quiet desperation, they all melted away in this one perfect tableau. Daniel looked up at Emily, water pooling in his own eyes, and whispered softly, almost reverently, "You and her, you are my world." The sincerity in his voice was palpable, resonating with every fiber of his being. Their daughter squirmed slightly in his arms, giggling, and Daniel lifted her high above his head, spinning her gently as she shrieked with delight. The sound was pure, intoxicating, filling the apartment with life and vitality, and Daniel felt a deep, almost spiritual gratitude. Each laugh was a reward, each smile a reassurance that the years lost could never take away the love they now shared. He lowered her carefully to the ground, letting her run ahead, her small feet padding across the wooden floor, and he felt the presence of her joy radiating like sunlight, warming every corner of his heart. Emily approached him, placing a hand on his shoulder, her touch grounding him, reminding him that this was not a fleeting moment, but a permanent reality. "He's so full of life," she murmured, voice trembling. "And you're finally here. All the time, Daniel. You're here." He nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat, eyes never leaving their daughter as she twirled in a little circle, laughing at nothing, yet everything. "I'm never leaving," he replied softly, his hand brushing against Emily's. "Not ever. I promise. Never again." The day unfolded like a dream. Breakfast was shared with laughter, spilled cereal, and playful scolds that were light-hearted and filled with warmth. Daniel sat on the floor, helping their daughter stack blocks, guiding her tiny hands, correcting her gently, praising her eagerly. Every small milestone, her first time balancing a tower without it toppling, her tentative attempts at spelling her name, was a miracle he was finally witnessing firsthand. Emily watched, leaning against the counter, and Daniel caught her gaze. Their eyes locked, and in that moment, words were unnecessary. Every glance conveyed the depth of love, trust, and understanding that had taken months to rebuild. Later, as the rain began anew outside, soft and persistent, Daniel took Emily's hand and led her to the window. Drops slid lazily down the glass, blurring the world beyond, and Daniel realized that rain had transformed in his mind. It no longer symbolized coldness or regret. It was a gentle reminder of renewal, of rebirth, of the night they had rediscovered each other. Emily rested her head against his shoulder, letting the rhythm of his heartbeat and the warmth of his embrace soothe the remnants of doubt and fear. Their daughter ran up to them suddenly, holding a small, hand-drawn picture of the three of them, stick figures adorned with bright colors, hearts and suns. "Look, Daddy! Me, you, Mommy!" she exclaimed proudly. Daniel knelt, taking the picture, studying it with a mix of awe and amusement, and lifted her into his lap. "This is perfect," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Just like us." Perfect Emily smiled, tears spilling freely now, seeing the man she loved not as the cold, distant figure from years past, but as the devoted father and partner he had become. Evening fell, painting the room in warm hues of orange and gold as the setting sun filtered through rain-streaked windows. Daniel tucked their daughter into bed, reading her a story with exaggerated voices and gentle tickles that made her laugh until her sides hurt. He watched her eyes grow heavy, finally drifting into sleep, and he pressed a soft kiss to her forehead. Emily joined him at the doorway, leaning against him, wrapping her arms around his waist, her head resting against his chest. "I can't believe this. We have this," Emily whispered, voice trembling. "After everything, we have a life together. A family." Daniel's lips found hers in a long, tender kiss, slow and deliberate, full of passion, love, and the quiet triumph of healing. "We fought for it," he murmured against her lips, "and we'll protect it, together." Always night fell fully, the city outside quiet, rain washing the streets clean. They sat together on the couch, holding hands, a soft blanket over their shoulders, and watched their daughter sleep in the nursery through the slightly ajar door. Every breath, every heartbeat, every small movement spoke of love restored, trust rebuilt, and a family reborn. Daniel realized that the pursuit of wealth, power, and ambition had once been meaningless in comparison to this home, this love, this presence. The rain continued its gentle lullaby, a steady reminder that the past could not be undone, but that the future was theirs to shape. Daniel and Emily leaned against each other, intertwined, drawing strength from one another, hearts beating in unison. Mini cliffhangers lingered subtly in the night. What challenges might life still throw their way? Could the fragile balance of trust ever truly be guaranteed? Yet those fears were softened, muted, by the overwhelming presence of love, devotion, and the bond they had rebuilt. Daniel pressed a final kiss to Emily's forehead, then looked down at their daughter through the doorway, a surge of fierce protectiveness and gratitude washing over him. He whispered, more to himself than anyone else, "I will never let go again. We are together, always, no matter what." Emily tightened her hand around his, resting her head against him as she murmured in agreement, "Forever." The night stretched on, serene and unbroken. Every heartbeat was a vow, every touch a reminder, every breath a testament to the transformation they had undergone. Love, patience, trust, and forgiveness had woven them into a family stronger than they had ever imagined. Rain would fall again, storms would come, but the fortress of their bond would endure, unshakable, filled with laughter, warmth, and unwavering devotion. And in that quiet moment, Daniel realized, fully and completely, that he had come home, not just to a house, not just to memories, but to the heart of his life, Emily and their daughter, the family he would never let go of again. And that's the story of love, loss, and a family reborn. If this touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and share. Let me know how it made you feel. Make sure you subscribe to Beyond Color Stories for more tales that will move your soul and stay with you long after the story ends. Thank you for listening, and remember, love has a way of finding its way back, even when all hope seems lost.